Hi, and welcome. Today, we're going to be looking at something called sensory acuity, a tool that is used to be able to understand people more at the unconscious level, a skill that's used to observe and notice things before the person notices it themselves. It gives you the skill to be able to observe without interpretation and to use this skill to calibrate for something that's happening at an unconscious level that generally most people are not aware of. Sensory acuity is valuable for virtually anyone. However, some professional roles gain particularly strong benefits, like coaches, therapists. Sensory acuity helps practitioners and noticing emotional shifts before clients actually verbalize them. You can identify incongruence between the worlds of an individual and their behavior. You ask better questions based on your observable changes, and this helps build stronger rapport and trust with an individual. So, for NLP practitioners, therapists of any kind, and coaches, it's one of the foundational communication skills. When you can master this, it gives you a really good set of skill at the communication level, helping you to get better results. Leaders and managers, for instance, can detect disengagement early. They can read team dynamics more accurately and adapt their communication style to improve the engagement and performance of individuals. The best leaders often notice subtle changes in confidence, morale, and motivation before they become any kind of issue. So, sensory acuity is the skill of seeing what others miss. So, learning sensory acuity really develops your leadership and your behavioral analysis skills. For example, have you ever walked away from a conversation convinced someone was angry with you, only to discover later they were simply tired, or assumed someone wasn't interested because they weren't making eye contact, when in reality, they were deeply focused on what you were saying? These situations happen a lot because we often confuse observation with interpretation. And sensory acuity is the ability to notice what is actually happening rather than what we think is happening, which in NLP we would call a mind read. In communication, leadership, coaching, sales, parenting, and relationships, people who achieve the best outcomes are often not those who speak the most. They're the ones who notice the most. They observe. They observe with intelligence, with observation. So, really, what is sensory acuity? Sensory acuity is the ability to accurately observe and detect subtle changes in physiology, facial expressions, voice tone, breathing patterns, body language, emotional states. It means using your senses to gather information before jumping to conclusions. And we've all done that, have we not? Simple definition: sensory acuity is the ability to notice what is actually there rather than what you assume is there. Think of a detective arriving at a scene, for example. A poor detective sees clues and immediately creates a story, an assumption of what they think happened. Now, a great detective gathers the evidence first and develops conclusions later. The same principle applies to communication. Let's look at the difference between observation versus interpretation, something that most people are not really aware of until now. This is one of the most important distinctions in personal or self development and communication in general. Because once we can establish the difference, we understand at a much deeper level. Because an observation is something that can be recorded by a camera. Think of it that way. For example, a person has their arms crossed, their breathing becomes faster, They looked down after you asked a question. Their voice became quieter. They smiled. These are all facts. These are all facts because you observed them, you noticed them. Now, an interpretation is different. Interpretation is the meaning we assign to those observations. So, for example, arms are crossed, they must be defensive. They're looking down, they must be lying. They've got a quiet voice, lack of confidence. No eye contact, they're hiding something. These are all assumptions, of course. The challenge is that interpretations are often wrong, and these can create miscommunication and break rapport and can lead to other things down the line. So example observations are, John crossed his arms during the meeting. It's just a simple observation. And the interpretation of that, he's defensive, he's cold, he's thinking deeply, he's comfortable, uncomfortable, his back hurts. Which interpretation is correct? We don't actually know. The only thing we know for certain is that John crossed his arms. So when we stay with the reality, with what we know, and that's the only thing we can know, because sensory acuity requires us to separate what we know from what we think. And this is how interpretation creates problems. Most communicational breakdowns occur because people react to their interpretations rather than reality. So have a think about that for a moment, just noticing the difference between observation and interpretation. Consider these examples. Relationships, for instance. Relationship observation, partner becomes quiet. The interpretation, they're upset with me. The reality, they may simply be tired. Workplace observation, a team member asks lots of questions. The interpretation, they don't trust my leadership. The reality, they may be engaged and simply curious. Coaching observation, client looks away. The interpretation, they're avoiding the issue. The reality, they may be accessing memories or processing emotions in their own way. And the important thing to take away is that the meaning we assign often determines the outcomes we are getting. There are 3 practical ways to strengthen your sensory acuity. 1, notice more without judgment. Most people observe selectively. Simply observe without filtering. Most people are focusing on what confirms their beliefs to be true. Instead, from now on, become curious. Just become curious and observant. Ask yourself, what are you seeing? What am I hearing? What am I noticing? Become a collector of information and observe without judgment. 2, describe, don't diagnose. Instead of saying, she looks nervous, say her breathing became faster and her hands started moving more. First is an interpretation. The second, an observation. Train yourself to describe behavior objectively. And this makes a hell of a difference in the way that you see and notice things. Calibrate changes. Sensory acuity is not about reading people. It's about noticing changes, subtle changes. For example, how does someone look when they're relaxed? How do they look when excited? What changes when they become uncertain? The change often provides more information than the behavior itself. A quiet person becoming animated tells you something. An animated person becoming quiet tells you something. Context matters. Now, a useful formula for this: observation to curiosity to understanding is far more powerful and better for your skills when observation equals assumption followed by reaction. So when we replace assumptions with curiosity, communication improves dramatically. Questions become more powerful than conclusions. The quality of your communication is directly linked to the quality of your observation. So observe without judgment and just notice. People often believe they are responding to reality, and in truth, they are responding to their interpretation of reality, what we call their map of the world. And sensory acuity teaches us to slow down that process, to notice first and interpret later. And to remember, the map is not the territory. What we observe is information. What we interpret is only a possibility. And the more accurate we observe, the more effectively we communicate, influence, coach, lead, and connect with others. The person who notices the most has the greatest opportunity to understand the most. And if you want to go deeper or find out what is really going on, we ask questions around your observations. This is known in the NLP modality as calibration for meaning. For example, John, I noticed on a couple of occasions your face going red when I mention your brother's name. Is there something you want to talk about? Example two. Hey friend, what happened there? Each time I started using the computer on both occasions, you started saying bad things towards me. What's going on? This is called calibration for meaning. It will only work if we are using our observations and not interpretations. We're asking questions to find out what's really going underneath that behavior that they're doing, not assuming. We're getting them to respond to us and tell us what's going on rather than us assuming. So to finish, observe and notice without judgment. And this is collecting raw data and not filtered data. And next, ask questions around your observations to calibrate and find meaning. But remember, it's very important that you first have a good level of rapport before you start asking these questions. And that's something we can discuss in another video. I hope you found this video useful, and once you begin using it on a regular basis, you'll start mastering the art of communication and influence. Stay safe and see you in the next video.